So, Dustin, welcome to the show. It's great to have you on.
Yeah, thank you for thanks for having me.
Yeah, so for our listeners, this is Dustin Fronk with at Residential OG on Twitter, and that's where I discovered him. And Dustin, for the listeners, how about we start from the beginning? What was your relationship with money growing up?
Yeah, so going back about a decade, I'm 29 now, so my relationship with money kind of all started around the 2008 crash. My family was upper middle class. The economy was booming. My dad had a creative concrete business. My mom was a CPA. She ended up working with my dad in a company. We had nice cars, super nice house, and it seemed like basically overnight everything switched. Within 6 months, the cars were downgraded, the house was downgraded. The shopping was different, the whole experience was different, and I was in middle school, just going into high school when all this happened. So maybe freshman, sophomore year, and this whole experience was really what got me interested in finances and money, because I was confused at how something like that could happen. I've just been a learning machine ever since. Been interested in marketing, business, investing, and eventually, within the last 3 or 4 years, I ended up here in real estate, using the money that I made through business, and now invest in residential real estate. And that's what my entire page is about. And that's basically the background of how I ended up here.
Interesting. So, in that 6 months, while your parents were kind of swapping out the car, swapping out the lifestyle, was it something they were a little bit more hush hush about, or was it something they were sharing with you while it was happening?
Uh, it was a little bit of both. I was old enough to where I kind of understood. And it was also, you could see it and hear it happening around you too quite a bit, because 2008 was pretty rough. The beauty of it though is I was at the perfect age where I was kind of immune to it, because I was just living in high school, like going out. You don't really have money in high school anyways. If you have $20 back in the day, there was a dollar menu at McDonald's. Now it's the $3 menu, but it didn't really affect me. So I saw it. I was aware of what was happening, but it didn't really hurt me too much. The house was different, but it was still the same. I still had the same friends, and it was just an eye-opening experience that got me interested in finance. But again, it wasn't really, I'm not going to have like a sob story or anything. It wasn't that bad for me personally.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's just interesting hearing about how parents decide to tackle, how involved they get their kids, and do they actually kind of lift up the hood of the car per se and show them what is actually happening with the family finances. So that's
Yeah,
interesting.
I think I more just saw it. I could see
Hmm.
the burden it was taking. Just I could see the burden. And I grew up in a sports background, very competitive, and that's also why I'm aggressive. I'm more forward, more attack. Because when you see that, my gut reaction, kind of fight or flight, was I want to step in, I want to be valuable, I want to help, I need to I need to get smarter, I need to figure things out, and it kind of drove me actually.
Okay, so let's get into the real estate stuff now. So July 9th, you posted a deal alert on your Twitter. Once again, this is at Residential OG, and you're breaking down a single family home here. We got a 3-bed, 1 bath. Now, what city is this in?
This is in the Twin Cities,
Twin
so
Cities.
Minneapolis, St. Paul area, where I'm from.
Okay. And okay, you say with clean Tish report. Now, what is a Tish report?
Yeah, this is a really, really great question. I'm not familiar with the whole country how this works, but a TISH
Uh-huh.
report stands for Truth in Housing Report. So,
Okay.
sorry, Truth in Sale of Housing Report.
Okay.
Basically, what that means for people who don't know is real estate is a giant asset. It's very expensive. There's loans, and consumers who buy real estate need to be protected, right? You know, because if you misbuy a pack of gum, it's no problem. If you misbuy a house, it's a huge deal. So the city and the county, they actually do what's called a truth in housing report, where they go out and the city, like an entity that isn't involved incentive wise with the buy or sale of the property, they do a report and they show what type of condition the house is in. So if there was a problem with the foundation, it would show up on there. If the plumbing didn't work, it would show up on there. And basically it's just to bring clarity to both buyer and seller of the true condition of the house.
Okay. So this is this a, do you know, is this a private entity or is this like a government entity?
It's government. So
It is a
if you
government.
were
Okay.
looking at the truth in housing, it would be on the county website or the city website.
Okay. Okay.
I'm not even sure if everywhere in the country has this, but in my area, it's a thing that
Cool.
it's a report
Yeah,
that's done
because I have
everywhere.
properties in Michigan and North and South Carolina, and I've never heard it, but that's cool. That it's interesting to see how different states do it. So, okay, so let's get into some of these numbers. So, the asking price is 159,000,
Yep.
and you're assuming a 7.5% interest rate over a 20-year amortization.
Yep.
Okay, so let's start with, let's actually jump to the mortgage payment. So you show $1,010. I kind of backed that out, and that equated to about 20% down. And
yeah, that was 20% down.
Yep. And if it would have been, and you said a 20-year amortization, if it would have been on a 30-year, it looked like the payment would have gone down to $876. So that would have been an extra like $100. Okay, so now
Even
on
better.
yeah, even better. So on the revenue side, the rent. So how did you go about getting that $1,900 assumption? What were the steps?
Okay, there's two ways that I like to find rent, right? First of all, and this one is easy, personal experience. So me and my partner have a combined 45 houses in our area. I'm getting rent from personal experience. I know exactly what these houses rent for, but that might not be helpful to a listener. The other great way to do it is I like to go off huduser.org. Basically, that's the Section 8 website. And they have something called, rental standards. So you can plug in any state, city, and county, and the website will show you exactly what Section 8 is paying in that area.
Awesome.
Now, that's a pretty good barometer because whatever they're paying, it's not going to fluctuate much off of that number. Like this house, maybe someone will pay 2,000 instead of 1,900. Maybe someone will pay 1,750. It'll fluctuate, but it'll be in that ballpark.
Okay. So how many houses in your portfolio fall under Section 8?
Right now, I want to say around 25 to 30%.
Okay.
That's off the top of my head.
How difficult are those to set up, and how happy have you been with those houses?
Section 8 is not difficult really to set up, and a lot of people are, it's kind of like a dirty word. Sometimes people think that it's something it's not. It's not this idea of like Section 8 is all bad and all crap, because the program is actually very methodical. That you have annual inspections. Your house has to be up to code. If anything, your house needs to be, it makes your business even more well run because there's so many guardrails with Section 8. And the other thing about Section 8 is, of course, you're going to have bad tenants. I've had terrible tenants who were Section 8, and I've had terrible tenants who were not Section 8, right? The Section 8 program has exploded, especially during COVID. And there's very long wait lists to get on Section 8. So having a Section 8 voucher is very valuable, which is also kind of dispels the myth of Section 8 tenants are trash, because they do not want to lose that voucher, right? They're incentivized to not destroy the house, whatever, because if they lose the voucher, if they lose the government paying their rent, it would be a huge deal for them, obviously, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I have no quarrels with Section 8. We do Section 8. We also do some not Section 8, but yeah, Section 8's been totally fine, and that website that I mentioned is a good barometer to find where rents
Cool.
are at.
Awesome. Okay, so next item is taxes. How do
Yep.
you go about estimating taxes?
The taxes, I mean, this again is public record. And actually, this is a really good topic to talk about. Taxes, right? When you buy a property and the sale happens, that property is going to get reassessed on the new sale value. That's something that people really need to think about when they're running their numbers. Because if a property hasn't been sold, and or if the assessment is super low, you might be running your numbers saying, oh, I'm going to cash flow, $400. But the second you buy it, and the person who had it before has had it for 20 years, and the county goes out there and reassesses it, your property taxes could jump 100 bucks a month, 150. So then it completely changes the math equation. But other than that, taxes are pretty straightforward. You can find them on Zillow. You just scroll down.
So it's great that you mentioned that, because I, oddly enough, ran into this very issue a couple months ago when my mortgage payment jumped up like $300, and it was because they reassessed it in Michigan, and this guy had owned it, I think 25, 30 years. It's each year it's only going up with the state declared inflation rate. And then as soon as I bought it, there was an unlocking process that I was not really aware of. So yeah, absolutely. That is definitely good to know.
Yeah, that's a secret one too. And you'll get the county tax letter in the mail, and you'll be like, wait, whoa. So it's part of the game.
Yeah. The interesting thing on that, actually, I thought, was the bank didn't really anticipate it. Like, they weren't already taking the increased amount out of the escrow. So now I'm actually having to put more in because I was deficient last year. So that was another thing that kind of
I had a little bit of that going on too.
Okay, so next item we got here is insurance.
Yep.
How do you go about estimating that?
At this point, I have a great relationship with my insurance agent, because I have so much quantity, very responsive, and I can go to him back and forth quick on text or email. But basically, I just get a quote from him, and I would recommend shopping around quotes. The insurance business is very competitive. And again, I have the luxury of personal experience from my other properties. So I know what my other properties insurance are at. Even if I don't message him, I can make a pretty educated guess of roughly what the insurance is going to be.
Gotcha. I'm sure some listeners are kind of wondering, how did you get that initial contact? How did you build a rapport, and how many agents did you really talk to initially?
Thinking back, I'm not sure how I met the first agent. I think I just called like the closest person to me, right? And then I had a friend who was in the business, and I said, who do you use for insurance? And the guy I work now is through a referral.
Okay.
And I go on tangents and stuff.
It's fine.
That's another thing that I think is super important, and why I preach real estate so much, is the compounding effect, not just on the asset, but the relationships. Everything about it is just long term. Everything about it is just stable. And these relationships, then they compound over time, year over year over year. And before you know it, I'm sitting here now and I'm like, how I don't even remember how I have all these contacts. They're all valuable contacts, but it's just year over year over year. And my favorite comparison is in say you're in business in some kind of tech field or whatever. Everything moves so fast and it's up and down so much that I just feel like you don't get the same compounding effect like you do in the real estate industry.
Awesome. Yes, definitely food for thought for all the listeners. Build the relationships. Okay, last item on the expenses is the management. So you got $100 here. So how are you guys managing your properties right now?
Yeah, so super exciting. We just me and my partner just hired a full-time guy on salary. So he manages all of our units, but I put 100 here as kind of a middle ground because I'm guessing the people that I'm talking to are probably, you know, newer or don't have giant portfolios. Maybe they're just getting into rentals, just learning about the power of real estate. And I put 100 because I think a lot of people are going to start out self-managing. And
Okay.
I didn't want to put 0 and I didn't want to put 200. So I just put it in the middle. I started out self-managing for the first 2 years.
Okay.
Which, if that's the case, that number would be at 0. And then a lot of people do 7 to 10% if you hire a property management company.
Mhm.
So you'd be somewhere in between.
Okay. Yeah, just for reference, like mine, I do pay 10% of the rent. So yeah, that would be
I was
about
at
200.
10% before we
Mhm.
hired a full-time salary guy. I was at 10% as well.
Okay. So how many units did you guys have before you did the math and said, okay, it makes sense for us to hire someone now?
Well, at first we used like a management company, you know,
Yep.
with a logo and a website and blah blah blah. And that was once we got to around 40 units total combined.
Okay.
And now we're at around 50-ish. The other thing is we have business backgrounds. I'm an operator, so I'm used to actively managing and operating a business. So with my temperament, with my experience, it made more sense to just go the employee route than hire a management company, because I constantly found myself like dissecting their company like as if I was operating it, and it
Okay.
kind of became an issue where we're like, let's just hire a guy that we can train ourselves, that we can implement our own systems with.
How did you go about hiring that person?
Funny enough, it was a guy that we went to high school with. So we've known him for, well, matter of fact, middle school. We've known him for 15 plus years. Veteran guy, served, very disciplined guy, someone we can trust, someone we know, someone who understands the business, has some experience being a handyman as well. Really just the perfect fit.
Awesome. Actually, I skipped maintenance. You had $95 here. Is that just personal experience and
Yeah, I
take?
just made that number up. I just put 5% of
Okay.
rental amount.
Okay.
So
Okay. And as I don't know, is there anything else you want to add on this deal while before we close it out?
yeah, I actually earlier you mentioned the fact that it was 20-year.
Mhm.
And I think that's important to mention why I said 20 years. And that's
Sure.
because at this point, I'm doing commercial lending. And most of those guys want to do 20 or 25, compared to the Fannie and Freddie stuff, or the conventional stuff is 30-year.
Okay.
The reason that's important is because the conventional loans are harder there's more underwriting, there's more documents, there's a lot going on. And conventional is much more, they're looking at the asset itself and not,
Mhm.
you know, turning over every stone and
Yep.
crawling all over.
So
So
I have a question on that actually. So I have
yeah.
one commercial loan on a 7-unit, and it is a 20-year amortization, but there's a 5-year balloon payment. Do yours typically have shorter like balloon payments where you either have to sell it or refinance with them or somewhere
Yeah,
else?
so I don't have any straight up balloon payments where I have to pay the entire amount.
Mm-hmm.
They're all adjustable.
Okay.
I don't, and then it's based off the prime interest rate. So basically
Okay.
just whatever the standard interest rate is.
Yep.
But we also try to negotiate, again, this is a little higher level stuff here, but if you're working with a bank, I would try to negotiate a ceiling and a floor,
Okay.
if that makes sense.
Yep.
I'll give you an example. In 2020, if I'm doing a commercial loan, 20 years with a 5-year arm, and at that time it was crazy land, and interest rates were at 3%. We would negotiate in a 1% cap up or down, no matter what prime is at term, at the 5-year term.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So let's say hypothetically that 3% loan, the 5 years comes up and prime, or just the world interest rate, is at 8%. It can't adjust to prime. It can only go up 1% because we negotiated a ceiling and a floor in, right?
Awesome.
So that's not common though.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the time, it's like you said, it's a 5-year balloon, and then it readjusts to whatever the prime interest rate is, and that's what most of my loans are. There was just one bank where we were able to put a ceiling in.
Cool. Yeah, that's a great negotiating tip, or something you can try to throw in as a wrinkle to your deal. So okay,
Yeah.
as we're winding out, I like to ask, and I feel like I could have like another whole episode with on like Section 8 and some of these financing, and maybe we'll do that in the future. But
we should do it. I'm ready to be active on here. I want to start putting out more content about this stuff, so I'd love to.
Cool, awesome. So I like to ask everyone, what's the worst and best piece of personal finance advice you've either heard or received?
The worst is, I don't have like a specific person who told me something and I said, wow, that's really bad advice, and I remember it. I think the worst is the consumer debt trap. And I see things like, there's one commercial that sticks out in my head. This might take the cake. It was a credit card company, right? And it was saying how you get the credit card, and then in the commercial, like, their house got better, their couch upgraded, like, and it's a credit card. You're using, basically the commercial was pitching to use credit to pay for a better couch and upgrade stuff. So the trap of consumer debt, high interest debt, which is really credit cards, auto loans, man, I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I even put student loans in there a lot of the times. Their interest rate's not super high, but some of the crazy debt that you can get into with student loans when you really don't even know what you're doing, it just completely tanks your net worth and hinders your ability to build wealth. So I would say that's the worst.
Okay.
The best. The best for me would be kind of like the basic principles, Rich Dad Poor Dad, of how to create creating cash flow. So in business or whatever it is, the only thing that really matters, the metric, is free cash flow, right? And the second thing that I am going to try to push is people thinking more about their net worth instead of just their income, right? And no one does that.
Yeah.
If you go to the bar, if I go out with my friends and people are talking, what do you do? The first question is, well, people don't say, they were cool talking about money. How much do you make? How much do you make? I want to make 100K. I want to make what you make has no correlation to your net worth. You can make $1 million a year and have a literal negative net worth and be in a terrible financial position. So I think the best financial advice was when I started thinking more in terms of net worth and equity. And that's how
Awesome.
you end up in real estate.
Awesome. Yeah. I mean, as soon as I totally would echo the people spend too much time on the income statement, not enough time on their balance sheet. And
Exactly.
I think if everyone just tracked their net worth, I think a lot of things would change in their lives.
Man, exactly. I do I should post these, but in my notebook, I do every month, and I've done this for years. I write net worth tracker.
Mhm.
And it's only, it's not a lot of lines. I just put debt, and when I started doing this, I had more debt than I do now. And then I put equity, so like cash accounts, equity in the house. And I think the reason most people don't think that way is it'd be really hard to swallow what they saw. Most people have negative net worths, and it's a hard thing to cope with. So they're just like, well, I make X amount. Let's just look at that.
Well, Dustin, it's been great having you on. I'm sure the listeners got a lot of value from this. I mean, a lot of people will post numbers like this, but not really have a lot to go off of or what's going into some of those numbers. So I really appreciate it. And I think others would say the same.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. Hopefully we can do it again sometime.
Absolutely. Take care.